The response by the lawyer for Matt Gaetz' friend is why today's talk of cooperation matters. Take a quick listen.
Did your client introduce Matt Gaetz to any underage girls for sexual relations?
All right. So I'm just going to let you sit down there, and so I can look over your head and ignore that question.
Look, Scheller doesn't represent Gaetz, and I'm sure he doesn't want to be part of any political process or drama. He's trying to get his client, Greenberg, the best deal he can. He can ignore the press, but you don't get to ignore this point from prosecutors, and they already know the answer, okay? And our next guest understands these realities very well. He's the Florida attorney who first pointed authorities in Greenberg's direction. David Baer was in the courtroom today. Good to have you, counselor.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
So you got into the Greenberg sphere by him accusing your client, who was a political opponent of his, of being a pedophile, correct?
That's basically what it comes down to. It's the irony runs thick, I guess, given the charges that we see here. So, like a lot of people that get involved in lots of different crazy stuff, sometimes it's just one of those things that opens the door and everything else comes spilling out. Right. And that's what this is a story of.
So you're in the courtroom today. What was your understanding? Does it meet my own and your experience in practice that you don't get a deal from the feds unless you've already given them something that is valuable to them?
In order to get to where the conversation was today, where you have both Roger, the prosecutor, as well as Fritz, the defense attorney, both standing up there saying, we anticipate there being a plea deal reached in a month and a half, there's already been some substantial conversations and show-me's that have happened. This isn't some willy-nilly process where, before a court they're like, I don't know, how about 10 and a half years and we'll, say what we know. It's much more thorough and meticulous than that.
Right. And you don't believe it's a coincidence that these types of investigations and charges started with Greenberg and then moved to Gaetz, that would seem to square with the understanding that once Greenberg started talking, it expanded the ambit of the investigators to include Gaetz?
I don't think it's a coincidence, and I know that the investigation into Greenberg led to the Secret Service and the U.S. Attorney's Office being interested in Gaetz. So, yeah, it's not a coincidence. It was a linear process.
What do you make of Greenberg?
He's a very smart guy, but he has a lot of demons, and he's a loose cannon, and he's a little unpredictable, and so that ties in with what everybody's wondering what's going to happen here with this criminal trial and how it dovetails into the other one. So the options that Mr. Greenberg has, he's facing 33 counts, all of which have a whole lot of evidence, and the jury's going to hear them all together. Nobody's coming out of that trial without a whole lot of convictions, which are going to send you to jail for the vast majority of the remainder of his adult life. That's not an option. And so the alternative is to plea. And any normal, rational person is going to do that. But, what I just said, Joel is sometimes unpredictable, to say the least bit. And so you shouldn't necessarily assume he's going to do the same thing that, you or I or a normal, rational person would do standing in his shoes.
How damaging are the Venmo transactions that were mentioned from the Daily Beast, Jose Pagliari, in the last segment?
Oh my gosh, that's incredibly powerful, evidence. As a former prosecutor sitting here, hearing that recounted, it sort of strikes me as a lot of people think, well, if I don't directly hand the money to that person, or I don't directly shoot that person, or whatever the crime might be, then I can't be responsible. That's certainly not true. If you operate through an intermediary, you're just as responsible, whether it's a financial transaction or a violent crime or whatever. So a lot of people that aren't prosecutors or aren't practicing law might not think that way. They might think they're building themselves some insulation if they have some go-between, some intermediary.
Right.
But that certainly is not the case.
But it doesn't say it's for sex explicitly. We don't know whether or not the woman who got the money says that that's what it was for. And if Gaetz denies it, how likely is it that that is enough to get him in trouble with authorities?
Well, if you didn't have a cooperating witness that had firsthand information, then all you have is circumstantial evidence.
But if
which can
Greenberg
certainly be
says,
strong enough,
oh, it
but-
was for sex. Greenberg said, let's say, theoretically, Greenberg says, oh, it was for sex. Gaetz says, this guy's a liar. He's trying to help himself by working with the feds. The woman doesn't say it is. And even if she does, it's just prostitution. And she was of age. So, you know, how big a deal is that to federal prosecutors?
Yeah. So anytime you have a witness testifying against another, especially for a plea deal, you know, you're right to be skeptical of, you know, the veracity, credibility of their testimony. And so you should always look to find some corroborating evidence for what they say. If it's just this, testifying, flipping witness saying it, well, you know, maybe that's not enough beyond a reasonable doubt. But if you have some corroborating evidence, which, these Venmo transactions certainly, you know, could provide that.
And the women.
Especially understanding, you know, circumstantial evidence is evidence.
Yep.
You know, we don't need, we're not limited to just explicitly written directions. We can read between the lines. Jurors can read between the lines. So yes, you know, all those things tied together into a bow, totality of the circumstances, that could certainly be a very powerful story for prosecutors to tell.
And again, we haven't confirmed it. At CNN, Daily Beast has it. Jose Pagliari is no joke, but we haven't confirmed it yet. The women, we'd have to know what they say it was for. And prostitution is a problem, not a big federal haunt. But if they were underage and if it was for prostitution and they were traveled for that purpose, this then becomes a federal matter of concern for Matt Gaetz. A lot of ifs and thens, and we'll see. And thank you very much, David Baer, for helping us understand the trail that we are on. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, be well. And again,
You too.
we don't have the reporting, but court, different than court of public opinion. But this is not a good development, that someone who says there is no connection between me and any of this stuff has these kinds of payments pop up.